Okay, so have you ever noticed how sometimes you're like totally nailing it on a project, like you're on fire, everything's clicking, and then bam, out of nowhere, you hit this wall?
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's like all your motivation just evaporates.
Exactly. And it's always when you're like, this is it, this time I've got this. So frustrating. But I was reading this business coach, Trevor Nel, and he says this whole up and down thing, it's not random at all. It's actually a cycle, a predictable pattern of success.
And he actually lays out this whole model, calls it the personal cycle of life and business success, which I have to say is a mouthful. But he breaks it down using these 7 Ps of business, which sounds very corporate-y, but stick with me.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are these mystical 7 Ps?
All right, so we've got people, product, price, profit, promotion, plan, and place. And Nell's point is that even though these are framed for business, the underlying ideas, they totally apply to like anything you're trying to achieve.
Okay, that's a relief because my profit from baking sourdough bread is definitely not financial, let me tell you.
Right, but you get that initial excitement that this loaf is going to be legendary energy. That's part of the cycle, too.
Totally. So we start with all this enthusiasm. We're like superstars, right? Then what? Nell says we hit a wall pretty quickly after that, right?
Yeah, he calls it the procrastination plunge, which honestly, who hasn't been there? We get so overwhelmed by like the next steps, the sheer amount of work left that suddenly reorganizing your spice rack seems like a way better use of time.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm a pro at finding those perfectly timed distractions. It's like my superpower. But so if this is a normal part of the cycle, what are we supposed to do? Just lean into the procrastination?
Well, what's interesting is that Nell actually recommends a pause. He calls it pause and ponder, but it's basically hitting the brakes for a bit.
Wait, seriously. Like when you're feeling stuck, his advice is to end eye up. That seems counterintuitive.
Right. You'd think you'd want to push through, but he says that forcing it can actually make things worse. He's all about using that pause to really understand what's causing the resistance. He says he goes to the beach, plays some golf, just clears his head.
Okay, I can get behind a strategic beach day. But is that really all it takes? Just a little R&R, and then you're back on track.
Well, not quite. It's not just about stepping away. It's about using that time to reflect, to think about those 7 Ps and figure out what needs adjusting.
So it's like a strategic regrouping, not just a vacation from your goals.
Exactly. And Nell isn't the only one who believes in the power of a well-timed pause. There's this whole concept in psychology called the incubation effect. Basically, it's this idea that stepping away from a problem can actually help you solve it more effectively when you come back to it. Your brain keeps working on it in the background, even when you're not consciously focused on it.
So like when you're trying to remember something and it drives you crazy all day, but then it pops into your head randomly while you're doing the dishes.
Exactly. Your subconscious mind is a powerful thing.
All right, so we've paused, we've pondered, maybe even caught a few waves. We're feeling refreshed and ready to jump back in. What happens next in this cycle of success? This is where things get interesting, right?
This is where, as Nell puts it, we face the reality check. And let me tell you, it's not always pretty.
Oh no. The reality check already sounds ominous. Like maybe I should have packed an extra ice cream cone for that beach day. What does that look like? What happens then?
Well, it's basically the point where we face some real obstacles,
Ah,
the
no.
challenges, the setbacks, the moments that make you question everything.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm starting to see why it's called the reality check.
Yep.
But doesn't that kind of contradict the whole pause and ponder thing? Like we take a break, come back, refresh, and then bam, reality hits us in the face.
It definitely can feel that way. And Nella says that this phase often hits even harder than that initial procrastination plunge we talked about.
Why is that? Is it because we're just naturally prone to self-sabotage?
Well, there might be some of that, but Nell says it's more because we've already had a taste of success at this point. We've climbed that first hill of the roller coaster, felt the wind in our hair, and then suddenly the track takes a sharp turn. And we're not ready for it.
So it's like that feeling of, wait a minute, I thought I had this figured out.
Exactly, and Nell says that's totally normal. We get a little momentum going, start thinking it's all smooth sailing from here, and then boom, reality sets in. It's like that moment on a roller coaster when you reach the top of the first hill and you're like, woohoo, this is amazing. But then you realize there's a whole lot of track left and it's not all going to be uphill.
And that's when the panic sets in, right?
No.
Like, oh no, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, our instinct is to freak out a little, maybe even abandon ship altogether. But here's the thing. This is precisely why understanding the cyclical nature of success is so important. It's like if you know that roller coaster is going to have its twists and turns, you're less likely to lose your lunch when it happens.
Makes sense. So instead of freaking out, we need to find a way to ride those waves. But how do we actually do that? Because the reality check sounds like it could be brutal.
It definitely can be. But Nell emphasizes that by anticipating these dips, by knowing that the reality check is coming, we're much better equipped to handle it. He actually tells this great story in the article about an entrepreneur who was killing it. I mean, they were on top of the world, their business was booming. And then out of nowhere, their biggest client, Vales, takes 3 other clients with them.
Oh man, that's rough.
Right. And this entrepreneur is thinking, this is it, it's all over. But you know what? They didn't give up. They understood that setbacks are part of the deal. They used that experience as an opportunity to regroup, reevaluate, and come back even stronger.
So it's about reframing those setbacks as opportunities for growth. Easier said than done, though, right?
For sure. But that's where those 7 Ps come in handy again. Nell is a big believer in constantly revisiting them, especially when things get tough. Remember how we talked about them earlier? People, product, price, profit, promotion, plan, and place.
Right, the not-so-corporate 7 Ps.
Exactly. And the key here is that they're not set in stone. They're meant to be fluid, adaptable to whatever challenges you're facing. This entrepreneur, for example, they realized they had put all their eggs in one basket with that one big client. So they revamped their people strategy, diversified their client base, and ended up in a much stronger position than before.
So it's like hitting the reset button, but in a strategic way. You're not starting from scratch, you're just recalibrating.
Exactly. And there's this great quote by President Coolidge that I think really captures the essence of this. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence.
Persistence. I like it.
Yeah.
But that also sounds exhausting, Like, how do we keep going when the reality check has us feeling defeated? What keeps us from throwing in the towel?
Well, this is where things get really interesting and we start to dive into the deeper meaning behind this whole cycle of success. Nell argues that it all boils down to one crucial thing: understanding your why.
Your purpose.
Exactly.
Hmm.
He says that when you have a strong sense of purpose, when you're deeply connected to the why behind what you're doing, it fuels your persistence. The journey becomes about something bigger than just checking off boxes or achieving a specific outcome. It's about making a difference, pursuing a passion, or contributing to something meaningful.
So it's not just about launching that dream business because, hey, being your own boss sounds cool. It's about why that business matters to you, what impact you hope it will have.
Exactly. Nell's whole philosophy is built on the idea that aligning your actions with your core purpose is essential for long-term fulfillment. And yeah, for pushing through those inevitable moments of doubt and discouragement. He believes that when your why is strong enough, it will carry you through even the toughest parts of the cycle.
So it's like that why becomes your anchor,
Yeah.
right? It keeps you grounded when those reality checks start flying around.
It's a great way to put it because it's not always obvious, is it? It's not like you just wake up one day and there it is, your big why on a silver platter.
Right. And sometimes, honestly, it feels like you thought you had it figured out and then you hit a bump in the road and suddenly you're like, wait, was I even going in the right direction?
Yeah. That's such an important point because what if those moments, those times when we think we've totally blown it, what if those are actually the most valuable parts of the journey?
You mean like even more valuable than a strategic beach day? That's a high bar.
Okay, maybe not more valuable than a beach day, but
Yeah.
seriously, Nell would say those moments when we feel lost, when we question everything, those are the times when we're really forced to dig deep and figure out what truly matters.
So it's like those failures, those detours, they're actually course correction.
Precisely. It's like if we're not careful, we can get so caught up in chasing a specific outcome that we miss the bigger picture. Those bumps in the road, they force us to recalibrate, to make sure we're still on a path that's aligned with our values, our purpose.
So how do we do that? How do we turn those aha moments into actual, change?
Well, Nell doesn't give us a magic formula, but I think what he's really getting at is the importance of reflection, like really taking the time to process those experiences, to understand what they're teaching us.
So it's like instead of just brushing ourselves off and saying, okay, well, that didn't work, let's try something else, we need to pause and ask ourselves, why didn't that work? What can I learn from this? Am I still on the right track?
Exactly. And that whole idea of the cycle of success, it's not just about achieving some external goal. It's about the internal shifts, the growth, the self-discovery that happens along the way. And that's messy, right? There are going to be ups and downs, detours, moments of doubt.
But ultimately, it sounds like what Nell is saying is that it's all part of the process.
Absolutely. It's about embracing the whole roller coaster ride, even the parts that make your stomach drop. Because in the end, those are the parts that teach us the most, the parts that shape us into who we're meant to be. And honestly, isn't that kind of exciting to know that even our so-called failures are moving us closer to our purpose, to a life that feels truly fulfilling?
I've got to say, that is a refreshing way to look at things.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a perfect note to end on because we've covered so much in this deep dive into Trevor Neal's model of success.
We have. And we've all probably experienced some version of this cycle in our own lives. But hopefully, by understanding these different phases, these natural ups and downs, we can approach our goals with a little more grace, a little more self-compassion.
Absolutely. And maybe even start to see those reality checks not as setbacks, but as opportunities for growth. So the next time you find yourself hitting a wall, remember, it's not the end of the world. It might just be the beginning of something even more amazing. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. Until next time.